everyone, how is it going? The Fuzz here with a slightly crooked hat today. It's an elevated hat, so we finally get down to business and talk about this balance patch. I put this off a little bit because my hat can stay on my head. Because I wanted to kind of, you know what? There you go. What I meant to say is I wanted to kind of brew some ideas in my head, see what other people had to say on the forums before I kind of came to some conclusions. But I'll give you the overall impression, and it is positive. I think this is a good patch. As always, it's on the whole positive. Are there some changes I dislike? Yeah, sure. But it is what it is. Now, in addition to the cards that were changed on this list, I have a few cards which were not changed, but were cards that probably could have been changed because they are also quite powerful. So without further ado, we're going to get into this. After we go through the cards, I'll kind of go over like each of the like main decks that are played and how I think they'll change, whether they'll still be good, whether maybe they'll be bad. So let's kick it off with the order. Hermelion. So the change to Hermelion is that rather than just paying 3 mana and readying everybody, you pay 1 mana and then 1 mana for every creature you want to ready up to 3. So if you want to ready all 3 of your creatures, you have to pay actually 4 mana, which stings a little bit. And if you want to ready, if you just pay 3 mana total, you'll ready 2 creatures, and you have the option to ready 1 creature for 1 less mana. On the whole, I would say this is a nerf, because you may often be in a situation with Priest where you have exactly 5 mana, and then you play Cavalry Field Captain to buff something, and then you use the Hermelion hero power after you attack with 3 creatures. So it's definitely a nerf. Priests, of course, will get hit by this the most, but overall, I'm actually a bit surprised. I mean, I know Hermelion is powerful, but it's like, in addition to already being double order, I think if the devs want to make this hero weaker, they have to make it 1 order, 1 generic, because as it stands, it's like kind of getting hit a lot, and it's a very specific hero. Like, it only works in like a handful of decks because of the double order, but I don't really mind that much. I mean, I never really played Hermelion a whole lot, so I will see, and I'll get to the priests being viable later. So that seems fair. I don't think it was necessarily that anticipated that they would change Mr. Hermelion, but when they said they were going to change a third of the heroes, and that is 6, I did think of Hermelion as maybe number 5 or 6, and so it is. Word of Grace now heals a little less. It'll heal less if you have a lot of aspects, and it'll heal more if you have less. So if you have exactly 1 aspect, you'll heal 3 instead of 2. If you have 2 aspects, you'll heal 4, like normal. And if you have 3 aspects, you heal 5 instead of 6, and then it's going to be 6 instead of 8, and then 7 instead of 10, so on and so forth. So this is, first things first, I don't think it's unreasonable to just straight up remove this card from the game, because it is the culprit behind 1 turn heal. It is what enables like these easy life win conditions. Because we have the gain 40 life win condition, burst healing just healing in general has to be very carefully handled. And the problem with Word of Grace was that it just healed too much. And because it drew a card, if you got it later, it was just really good. You heal like 8 or 10 HP and just draw another card. So small nerf, but it's probably good. 1 turn heal gets a lot worse because of this, since they're the ones who would play it with like 5 aspects or 6 aspects. So it'll be a lot worse for them, but I don't mind. I think 1 turn heal is a stupid deck, so no problem. The only other decks that suffer are Mono Order, which is mostly Priests. So Cavalry Field Captain is one of the 3 cards that was not changed, which is a surprise considering some other well-known cards got hit. And Cavalry Field is like possibly the best card in the order aspect in general. It is just absolutely insane. Auto included pretty much every order deck that's not like 1 turn heal. And considering that Library Guards got hit, spoiler, though you probably already knew that, I'm actually very surprised it didn't feel necessary to deal with this card. I think at the very least removing that second effect, or you could keep the second effect but make the first effect maybe a little bit weaker, or make it a double order card. I don't know, maybe keeping it single order is fine, but I don't think anyone will dispute that this card is absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, it somehow survived the nerfs, which is weird. But maybe, and you have to consider that the buff patch is going to be coming. I don't know how soon, but maybe like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe a month, who knows. Presumably before the campaigns, right? If we see buffs to board clears, I think Cavalry Field might be less obnoxious if you don't lose to these snowball early game aggro decks as quickly. Might be okay, but he survived. And then Instill Life is back to single order. This one's gonna ruffle some feathers. I think it should be double order. It's kind of debatable because at single order, it's nice because you can put it in a lot of decks. And it makes you want to splash order, right? Because it's a powerful card. On the other hand, we made it double order because of Shifting Aurite being really stupid when you brought back 2 of them. Like, Shifting Aurite got nerfed too, but not in a way where it would prevent you from instilling it. So, I think whether or not this card is broken depends on what other cards are in the game. Like the 2 mana cards, the things that you can bring back. What impact this is going to have? Well, it means Care Bears could come back because Care Bears are nature, order. Now they can play Instill again, and Instill was kind of the whole reason why they existed. They would give up Flesh Sculptor and stuff like that to get Instill Life. They might come back, maybe. Considering some of the hits to nature, it's debatable, but it's something. At 4 now, I would say let's wait and see. If I'm sure if it so happens that Instill is too good again, they could just change it back. But it used to be 1 aspect, like originally, and it was never really that big of a deal. It was never really thought to be like overpowered. So 1 might be fine. It does mean that we have to be careful with our 2 mana creatures in the future. Moving on to Wisdom, we got Charged Aurite. Probably nobody expected this one. I think it's a really good change. Basically, the Aurite starts with 2 energy instead of 1, but no longer gains. And I think this is really good because the problem with Aurite was that it was such a dangerous 1-drop. Since if your opponent doesn't remove it, it could hold like 7 energy and have like ridiculous plays with Foundry Engineers or something. I think the main reason is it restricts future design of energy cards because if a card is like decent with energy, then it's gonna be absolutely broken with Charged Aurite. And if they make it good with Charged Aurite, that probably means it's trash otherwise. So Charged Aurite becomes this like unbalancing mechanism. So I think this version is fair. It has 2 energy. It'll give something 2 energy, so that's an extra shield, an extra golem, or extra something. I think this is perfectly fine. It's not like energy decks were really being played that much, except for energy aggro, but I think in energy aggro, this is still fine. So, good change, thinking ahead for the devs. Shifting Aurite. Oh man, everybody's favorite card, Mr. KFC. So, it's 2 mana now, which is quite a big deal, because at 1 mana, it was like a whatever 1-drop, but it was absolutely insane once you got the aspects up. Now it's a garbage 1-drop, but it's pretty good later. So like it shifts a little bit, and at 2 mana it seems a lot less obnoxious, even though ranged and swift is still pretty nasty. But you won't get overrun in the early game, and considering that, you know, it only goes up to 3 attack, like it's rare that it's gonna have 4 attack or more these days because of the previous nerf. It might just be okay as it is. Maybe. I mean, don't get me wrong. Going from 1 mana to 2 is a big nerf to any card. So, if Shifting Aurite is still too good, oh my god. I don't think it's going to be too good. Yes, you can instill these, but you have to put these into your deck, and they're a little bit worse. And you have to play them for 2 mana, which is, again, a little bit worse, where you could just play them for 1 mana, and they were really good. The main reason why this is a big deal is because you can no longer play an Aurite on turn 1, and then buff it with Horizons, like, immediately after. So that's good. Great change, and should be a fine card now. I can't tell with certainty whether, like, these Kayano decks or Dragon Combo are still going to use it. They might not. They might. I'm sure it'll need to be tested. But I think at 2 mana, this card looks a lot more fair, even if it has ranged and swift. New Horizons did not get changed. This is the card I basically blamed everything on. You could argue whether or not I was right. My reasoning has always been that it's just too good on turn 2, that you don't need this card to get up aspects. Like, you really don't. And I feel like when one player uses it, but the other doesn't use it, it's like, the game feels a little unbalanced. That's my main problem with it, is that I feel like we could do without it. And having played a lot of games where I go to like 3 or 4 aspects without New Horizons, it's completely fine to play a control deck without Horizons. It's fine, guys. I'm telling you. You don't have to play Horizon into ridiculous stuff. So, I would actually just like to remove this card from existence and, like, try a meta without it. Really. I don't think it's going to get any worse. I think it's going to be fine. Oh, well. It didn't get changed. It is what it is. But considering all the other changes, maybe it's going to be fine. But I can't help but feel like this card is always going to be like the go-to 2-drop for Wisdom. And it's going to keep Wisdom as a support color, because that's the main reason you're running Wisdom, so you can ramp. Now with Library Guards being a lot worse, like, what else are you doing with it, since Mono Wisdom actually suffers really badly at the loss of Library Guards. Well, you know, it being worse. So I'm still going to argue until the end of time, or until I get bored, that this should have been changed, but we'll leave it as it is. Frost Elemental is now 2 mana 2 aspect instead of 3 mana 1 aspect. That's always a good change for a card, so that's nice, I guess. I mean, Frost Elemental is so like no play anywhere, but now it's like an okay card. It still kind of sucks because it has the crappy stat line, but like, it's not that bad. It's not that good either. I guess it fits nicely with the Wisdom theme because of the freeze. The main reason this is good is because you'll usually have 2 aspects before you have 3 mana. So in essence, it's like a 1 mana discount. That's good. I mean, it wouldn't be good on turn 2 anyway, so you could basically think of it as a 2 mana discount. And because Power Discharge now exists, you have a lot of ways to use this effect with you know, freezing something and then instantly killing it. It gives Wisdom a little bit of extra removal, so that's nice. I mean, we're not probably gonna see it because Mono Wisdom, like, doesn't have much going for it other than like Snowstorm and Lamp. Because now that Library Guards is, you know, not like an amazing card anymore, that deck doesn't have... It's hard to justify running Mono Wisdom. Whereas if Library Guards had been a double Wisdom card instead of what it is, it might actually be a reason enough to run it, because you will be the only one who can use it. But, I mean, it's a good change, obviously. A buff to a crap card to make it like an okay card. That's always good in my book. So speaking of Library Guards, so now the difference is when it comes into play, you have to pay 1 mana to draw a card. That's a big deal. So that means no more playing it on curve and getting card draw. Yeah. If you want to draw the card, you basically have to pay 4 mana, so it's like a 4 mana card. And a 4 mana Library Guards is, like, just okay. Not bad, but not great either. So, it's gonna see way less play. Like, Kayano decks aren't gonna run it at all. Well, that's also because Kayano works a little differently now. Our control deck's gonna run it. They might just run Jin instead and Ancient Wisdom and not rely on this, because, like, if you played without the card draw, it's not awful, but it's not great either. Okay, don't get me wrong, I don't think the card is trash. Certainly not. I think the card is fine. Like in Trials or Draft, you still be happy to pick this up, because if you do play it as just a 2/3 at 3 speed, that's fine, that's decent enough, and if you have the extra mana to draw the card, that's good. So it goes from an amazing card that's auto-included everywhere to just like a decent card that's like, maybe like if you're playing a budget deck, you'll toss this in for some extra card draw. I don't know. I guess it's fine. Library Guards has had a pretty good run, being run in every... I mean, if you were running New Horizons, you were running Library Guards, obviously. It was one of the main selling points of Wisdom. Now, oh well. It was nice knowing you. We'll be seeing you a lot less. Sunborn Subordinate has 1 less attack. This seems really surprising, but my understanding is that they hit this because of Limited. In Limited, this card was pretty ridiculous because it was a good body. If you had Order, it had Lifebound as well, and had a pretty ridiculous effect. So I think they tried to like change it for that reason, because outside of Limited, the card doesn't see much play. So like in Constructed, you wouldn't even care. But in Limited, it's less of an insane card. It's still probably really good. It's just not ridiculous. So that's fair. And lastly, Titan. Essentially for the same reason as the Sunborn Subordinate. This card could just win games by itself because it would snowball. This version has... It's like better to start because it's a 4/4 body immediately. And it can shock 2 things right away. Whereas the previous Titan was a 3/3 that had only 3 energy. So by itself it was a lot worse. But it could then kind of grow. So I think it's okay. I think this Dust Titan is still fine. It'll see as much play as it did before, which is to say not much, because again, Mono Wisdom isn't really like good or anything, and that's where you want to run it mostly as like a boss, like an energy boss monster. But I mean, this should be fine, and it's still gonna be a good card in Limited. It's gonna be a great card in Limited, so that's fine. I'm totally okay with this change, even if it doesn't seem to have that much of an impact. So that's fine. We're moving on to Nature now. Kayano. So, previously you would pay 2 mana, and then you would play a creature up to 3 mana, you know, and then it would be delayed, and then it would come on the board with a Mind Emblem. Now, you pay 0 mana, but you just pay the creature's mana cost. So, this means that it basically, first of all, it is a nerf in the sense that you can't discount creatures, because you would Kayano anything that was 3 mana, 2 aspect, because you would basically get a discount on it. That's why Library Guards was so good. On the other hand, it's a buff because you can Kayano 4 cost creatures, and if you Kayano something that costs 1 mana, you will only pay 1 mana. So basically, this makes the hero less powerful, but more flexible, and I'm okay with that. I like these kinds of changes. I think another reason is they want to get away from this idea that these 2 aspect 3 mana cards are like automatically good for Kayano, and it's like you have to consider, okay, this is gonna be insane with Kayano, right? So now you don't have to worry about it, right? Because you're still paying the creature's mana cost. You're basically delaying the card, but you're getting a Might Emblem on it in return. And if the creature has some kind of an effect that requires mana, like Power Seeker or something like that, then you have more mana to work with it. Well, Power Seeker is a bad example, but you get the idea. Sadly, it's only level 2 or lower. So, no Necromantic Cult. That kind of sucks, because Necromantic Cult was pretty good. Also, Rocky Berserker, which was really good with Kayano, because it would get the Might Emblem and get 2 speed, obviously gets a lot worse, because you have to pay 3 mana. So, it's gonna hit Limited as well. It's gonna be a decent hero in Limited. I guess it's actually gonna be still fine, because it's like a hero power that like any deck can use, right? To some way. It's just not as specifically oriented for these mid-range creatures. We'll see if this makes Kayano not see any play. Because we have so many heroes, it's very easy for some of them to just not be played. But that's inevitable. I can't imagine how you could balance 18 heroes to be equally played. That's impossible. So I'm okay with this change. See what happens. Tornado Outbreak. Now it costs 2 mana. That is a huge nerf. Just like shifting Alright, going from 1 mana to 2 is a colossal nerf. But Outbreak, I think, goes from a really good card to complete trash. Almost complete trash. Because saving 2 mana is much harder than saving 1 mana. The fact that it costs 1 aspect is meaningless. Because you can't just Outbreak a creature and do nothing, right? You have to Outbreak in addition to getting a favorable trade or playing another creature. So I just can't imagine putting this into a deck, honestly. Correct me if I'm wrong, but right now I would rate this card like almost trash. And certainly in Limited, like it goes from like really good to like whatever. So it kind of sucks in that Nature loses like their best spell, but Landslide gets buffed. So maybe you play Landslide instead? We'll have to see. It's like this. At 1 mana, the card is maybe a little too good. At 2 mana, it's bad. How do you... You can't make it cost 1.5 mana, right? It's tough. the only way to like balance it would be to make it one mana. I had a suggestion some time ago to make it 1 mana, but the creature that's bounced costs 1 less mana. So if they bounce your creature, you can replay it for cheaper, so you don't lose as much tempo. But they can bounce their creatures to do some combo wombo. But if not that, if you want to keep the effect of just return it to your hand, I feel like you can't make it really balanced. It's either going to be bad, which it is at 2 mana, or it's going to be really good at 1 mana. I don't know. I guess I kind of dislike this change because I liked Outbreak as a card because of the flexibility. If it was causing issues, it was because nature had all these 3-speed shenanigans. So in addition to controlling the board because you could never attack them, they also had the best like tempo spell. But whatever. Rip in peace, Outbreak. Summoner Druid is now 2 aspects instead of 1, and it has 2 HP. I really don't like this card because it produces some absurdly obnoxious starts. Now that it's a turn 3 play, it is slowed down a little bit because you'll have to play it on turn 3 and then use the effect and get like a 2-drop or a 3-drop. It's still basically the same, you just have to wait 1 more turn. So is it gonna see play in like Hate Bears or Care Bears? Maybe. It might be worth a shot because they might be willing to wait 1 more turn. Now that it has 2 HP, it doesn't die as easily and it could maybe even act as a defender. So it's a nerf, but not that big of a nerf. And honestly, I'm worried that it's going to be the same issue where you just play it and then you like play an extra creature and then next turn you get like 2 extra mana. That kind of stuff is really dangerous, but I am glad it's at least like 1 more aspect. Although this means Plague Vermin, for instance, can't kill it anymore. Whatever. Hopefully it's not broken. Landslide is now 3 mana instead of 4. That's completely fair, considering that the things it can't hit are very significant. But hitting 2 2-cost things is really good. Like, if you play against Priests, hitting 2 Temples is really good. If you only pay 3 mana, that's solid. There should be a lot of targets, although against some decks it'll just suck. Mostly against control decks, because they tend to run not a lot of 2-cost stuff that are creatures. So, we'll have to see. It'll be meta dependent on whether or not you need to run this card. In some cases it'll be good, in some cases it'll be bad. You might run it anyways because it'll help you beat other aggressive decks by just sending their garbage back to their deck. If you hit like 2 1-drops, it's basically equivalent to killing them a lot of the time. So, the card is looking okay, actually. I think it looks like it might be worth a shot. We'll see if Landslide replaces Outbreak. It might. Centaur Illusionist. So the only change here is that the discount applies to the creature that you bounce. So you can't do that crap with Slave Gladiator where you play Slave Gladiator, then you play Centaur Illusionist. You bounce the slave back, and then you just use the 2 mana discount to play like an Elf Warrior, and then you just replay the Slave Gladiator. That was really stupid. So that's been fixed. The discount only applies to the creature you bounce, as it should have been to begin with. So the card is still good. It still serves the same purpose. They just removed the most stupid interaction with it. And Life Force Incarnate. This one, from what I read, raised a little bit of a fuss. They basically removed... Okay, it now only gives you the creature when it comes into play. So it's pretty much like a Library Guards. You play it, you get 1 card. That's it. Now you might think, oh, it's so much worse. But honestly, it's only slightly worse. Because if Life Force lived, you were basically super winning anyways. The reason... Originally, Life Force only gave you the creatures at the start of your turn. So you would play it and you would get nothing. And only next turn would you start getting cards. And it sucked. And then they added the, you know, when you play it, you also get a card. And it suddenly became really good. Because you usually just get the 1 card. Because they'll usually kill it immediately. So, yeah, I mean, the fact that it doesn't draw you multiple cards doesn't make it that much worse. And I think it's great that they did this. Because Life Force Incarnate could be so depressing to play against. Since if you can't actually remove it, it gets them all the cards back. Like all the Library Guards you killed, all the chickens you killed, and it just becomes like a never-ending cycle. So I think this is totally fine. The card is still good, although a note to the developers, I would recommend consider making this 1 green aspect, because it's not like an insane value card anymore. It's just a decent value card. And I think 1 aspect, like 1 nature, 2 generic, just like Sunchaser Orite, would be, I think, pretty fair, because it would allow more aspects to splash it, and it would be like an alternative to library guards. I think that would be fair. At 2 nature, it's a little bit rough, but still solid. If you play like a nature deck that you go to 3 aspects, it's still a good card. It's just value. And if you have a decent board, it's gonna be good. Like in Hate Bears, it's still good. It's just as good. It's only slightly worse, but not by much. So that's a completely fine change. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, Life Force. You're still good. Moving on to Rage. This one's gonna be really fast. Advanced Zash, just 4 turn cooldown instead of 3. That's fair, because the hero power is insane if you think about it. 3 damage to everything? That's almost as good as Cataclysm. Not quite, but 3 damage kills a lot of things in this game. So having access to a hero power that can do that is incredible. And now that it's every 4 turns, you actually have to think about when you use it. Right? You can't just do it whenever. Like, okay, if I use it, I have to go 3 turns without it before I can use it again. I think that's fine. I think Zash will not really change that much. Maybe Shamans get slightly worse, but Shamans actually rarely even use that hero power. Side note, you might argue Advanced Darius should also be made 4 aspect. I mean, 4 turn cooldown. And that's a fair argument, actually. I didn't include it on the list of stuff. Though maybe I'm surprised this didn't get changed, because I wasn't expecting Zash to get changed. But now that I think about it, yeah, probably Advanced Darius should also have a 4-turn cooldown, because the ability is almost as good. You might think it's only 1 damage, but 1, it costs 4 mana instead of 5. 2, Wisdom has a bunch of freezing effects, so they can convert that 1 damage into a kill. And 3, it also shocks, so whatever you don't kill can't attack you. And 4, it does not hit your side. So if you have a board and they have a board, the hero power just shocks all their creatures and then you just go face. Whereas Advanced Zash will kill your board a lot of the time. So yeah, probably Advanced Darius should be 4-turn cooldown now that I think about it. I think that's fair. I think it's fair to say. Burke. So Cruel Text started the petition, give Burke a little bit of love or something like that. And so they did. So original ability, you did exactly 2 damage to 2 things in the front. Now you pay 3 mana in addition to the 1, and you deal that much damage. So if you pay 4 mana, you can deal 3 damage to 2 things. And if you pay 2 mana, you can deal 1 damage to 2 things. So basically, it just gives Burke a little bit more flexibility in his hero power. I think that's good. Being able to do the 3 damage is really good, because now you can actually remove a lot of stuff from the front. Yeah, you take damage, but it's a freebie ability that could kill like 2 things. I mean, if you killed like 2 library guards with it, like that's pretty good, right? Yes, you paid 4 mana, but that's still good. And it makes it a little bit more competitive with Advanced Zash, because the ability is available sooner. Also, if you, on turn 3, activate it, you could do 1 damage to 2 things. So you could kill like 2 Slave Gladiators now that they have 1 HP. Or you could kill like an Aristocrat and a Goblin Warrior. Yes, you take damage, but you killed them and they were going to hit you anyways. So, yeah, good change. Burke is a lot better. It might see some play in Limited even. Maybe. It's a consideration, I think. If your deck didn't get a lot of removal and you don't want to wait for Advanced Zash, because that's like a 5 mana 3 aspect. Good job, developers. Now we move on to Dominion, which got the most changes. So Basic Despina, the change here is that rather than generate mana, you basically save mana. So you can pay up to 5 mana, you have to pay 1 to start, and then pay up to 5, and then you get that mana next turn. So you essentially are giving up some mana to get a mana boost next turn. That's pretty cool. Yes, it's worse than the previous ability, but it's still usable. You could use it to basically ramp out something bigger. You could play a Thunderstorm Titan on turn 3 instead of 4. You could ramp out Cataclysm a little bit faster if you play it with, let's say, 3 mana. You could kind of generate 2 mana next turn. Yeah, it's fine. As far as Dragon Combo is concerned, I'll get to that when I cover Dragon Combo. Dragon combo, I think, is still fine. It's still playable. The main difference is you can't do 20 damage on 12 mana anymore. That's the main difference. But it might still be fine. I think the hero power is, again, a little bit less powerful, but a little bit more flexible. We'll see just how good the deck is. I still think it'll be fine, even though Cataclysm got nerfed as well. And if ever there's any ways to, like, use a lot of mana in one turn, Basic Despina will be good. But yeah, no more Cataclysm, Refresh, like, Double Djinn, New Horizons. None of that crap. Unless you're willing to basically skip your entire turn to do that. So, that's fair. Good change, good nerf. Should be interesting. Coronis. So the reason Coronis is being changed is because it was absolutely insane and limited. Now it's a little bit less insane. The main difference is the Ravens no longer grow beyond 2. So if you activate it, you get a second Raven. Your first Raven is still going to be a 2/2. It's not going to get bigger. So that's very important, because one problem was that these Ravens could just become such a value engine where you upgrade an existing Raven to 3/3, and then the next time it gets upgraded to like a 4/4. And it was just insane. I actually kind of think the buff should only apply to the Raven that you summoned this turn. So that if you summoned like 3 turns in a row, you got 1/1 Ravens, and then like the final time you finally get some damage in, they would all get upgraded. But I'm glad Coronis got hit. It's gonna help in limited. I still think it's pretty good, but it's not like insane. And with the buff to Burke, it maybe isn't like the best hero anymore. It's gonna have to be we're gonna have to play with it a little bit to see. It's still gonna be a popular hero because Dominion is really good in limited, although less good in draft than in trials. And so maybe you don't auto pick Coronis. We'll see. Hopefully that's not the case. Especially since a lot of the Dominion cards got hit as well. Slave Gladiator, everybody's favorite card, now has 1 HP instead of 2. You could argue it should just be scrap because 0 mana cards are dangerous, but going to 1 HP does matter, and you have to consider kind of the future. This card also now dies much more easily to stuff like Arrow Barrage and Fire Blast. That's actually significant if enough people run those cards, so that if you try to get that super opener of Aristocrat into Goblin Warrior into Double Gladiator, and they just wipe your entire board with Barrage, that's gonna suck, right? So that's good. You can still play very aggressively, but it's much easier to punish now, which I think is important. Plague Vermin can kill this now as well. Burke can kill this more efficiently with just 2 mana. Mutant can kill this. Yeah. That's good. I mean, Fire Blast is going to become like the super anti-aggro card now. I think that's good. I think a 0 mana Goblin, yes, it's 2 aspects, but whatever, is much more fair than a 0 mana Golem. And this card was really annoying, so this is a good enough nerf that I think these, what were they called? Chinese implants or whatever decks are going to have to think twice, because they could get very easily wiped by AoE. And when I was talking about the future, the buff patch, I imagine, is going to make the distribute cards a little bit better. So they would be devastating against a lot of 1 health creatures anyways. Like Snowstorm would just be like absolute massacre against these guys. So that's good. I think we should see less of this aggro, but you'll probably still see some because it's like an easy enough deck to play. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it matches up. Good times. Inherited Wealth. My understanding is that the main difference now is that these creatures are not considered to have been played, which means you can't swift them with Neva. Mainly, you can't do stupid stuff like Inherited Wealth summons a Minotaur and you swift it. Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's still kind of annoying, but the fact that Slave Gladiator got nerfed does nerf this card as well, so it's gonna be a lot worse. We'll see if it's even good enough to run that basic Neva Wisdom, Dominion Nature deck. I have not played much with it myself, so more experienced people are going to have to say whether or not the deck is still good with the nerfs. But good change. Speaking of Raging Minotaurs, it's a 4/5 now instead of a 5/5. I wasn't expecting this nerf, but it's completely fair. 5 attack is a lot. That's 1/4 of your health. With 4 attack, this does hit a lot less damage, which I think is fair. Totally fine change. No problems here. Bloodseeking Mutant, just like the Coronis Ravens, he will now not grow beyond 3. That's fine. He rarely ever got bigger, although he could, and there were times where he could get really big. What was really dumb is that if your opponent had a mutant and you wanted to play a mutant, you would have to make his mutant bigger. And that was kind of annoying, so I think this is fine. And it's also going to make it a less powerful card in Limited, where it's only going to be a 3/3. It's still going to be a good card, but not as insane. So, good change. Cataclysm is now 6 mana. Again, I don't know. Honestly, I still think this should not read Destroy All Creatures. And it should be like Destroy All Creatures, but something, right? And then you wouldn't have to cost 6 mana, because 6 mana is a lot, right? And I feel like by making it more expensive, we're just kind of avoiding the issue, where maybe it should just be 5 or even 4, but with some kind of a limitation on it. Maybe when the buff patch comes along and we improve the board clears, we can go ahead and change this up a little bit, so it's not like the go-to card. Now, 6 mana versus 5 does matter, because for Dragon combo, that means Cataclysm comes online 1 turn later. That matters. Although, Basic Despina, the way it is now, can actually help you ramp it out a little faster. Like as an example, you play New Horizons on 2, and then on 3, you play, I don't know. Well, you could Hero Power even. No, that's too slow. You have to go another mana, and then on turn 4, you can Hero Power after Horizons, and then you will be able to cast Cataclysm on 5, basically always. So, actually, that's not that different from what it used to be, now that I think about it. But it does mean you have to use Basic Despina, but Basic Despina's cooldown is now 2. So yeah, I guess it doesn't change that much. It just means it's like you have to run it with Basic Despina, because it's otherwise really hard to get to. But that's what you were doing anyway. So, you see what I'm getting at? We're not really dealing with the problem, we're just slightly, like, playing around it. That's why I kind of think Dragon Combo is not necessarily going away. Like, it didn't get that much worse. Anyways, Scavengers Bidding is the last card that I think should have been changed, but wasn't, because it's extremely obnoxious. And this is the card Dragon Combo is going to go to heal, right? If they can't win with Dragon, if it turns out that they can't win with Dragon anymore, they're just going to go to this card. And this is just as depressing to play against as Dragon. So, please do something about this, devs. I hate this card. Corruption. Well, actually, Jacquerie technically is the minion, but we'll cover Jacquerie last. Consume Spirit. Now, the creature that you drain only loses HP and not attack. And the creature that you buff only gains attack and not HP. So what does this mean? For the most part, it's still the same card, but if you don't kill the creature that you're draining, you probably won't be able to free trade with it. Like, if you buff, like, your 1/1 Infected Survivor and try to kill, like, a Thunderstorm Titan, it'll now just trade instead of killing it, because your Survivor will still only have 1 HP. So, slight nerf. It's completely fine. Consume Spirit is still a good card, so no problem there. I think it's fine. A good change. Spoils of War is finally what I think it should have been to begin with, where it costs 2 mana, 2 aspects, and if it's any 3 creatures died, you get to draw 3 cards. I mean, you're not gonna... Let's not kid ourselves. You are not going to summon 3 Enchained Souls. If you want to summon 3 minions, play Forced Labor instead. So, is it good now? I mean, draw 3 for 2 is really good. It's just that it's not that consistent to activate it. So, I think you kind of have to build a deck around it. Now, interesting thing is, Amon's Ritual is a card that gets better because of this. Because Amon's Ritual is one way you can sacrifice, like, multiple cards, right? If you have 3 minions, sack them all, get a Succubus or something, and then play Spoils of War. You can even sacrifice 2 creatures and summon Dr. Styx. Dr. Styx will then come out, kill a 3rd creature on your opponent's side, and you can play Spoils of War. Yeah, that might work out. I think it's only really gonna work out in those decks that like summon a lot of stuff and then run like Enoch or something like that. In which case, the Spoils of War might be good. Like that Corruption Dominion Enoch sack deck might run this. Although with Stronghold Metropolis, they already had consistent card draw. They might not need it. So we'll have to see if it's actually even necessary. But at least it's not terrible. At 3 mana, it was terrible. At 2 mana, it seems okay. So it's a good change because a card went from terrible to okay. But even though it might not be played at all. But it's worth experimenting with at least. And lastly, Jacquerie. So he now has 3 attack instead of 4. That's totally fine. The stat line is still good for the cost. Considering that it's basically like +1/+1 on a friendly creature. It's still a good card. Like 1 less attack, that's fine. That's fair too. And it's another little nerf to the Slave Gladiator Clown Fiesta aggro deck. So now I'm gonna cover the main decks and how they're gonna change, how I think they're gonna change. So starting with Priests. Priests get a little bit of a nerf in terms of Word of Grace healing a little less and Hermelian's a little worse. But it's not that bad because the core of the deck is still the abuse of the temples and ridiculously powerful creatures such as Cavalry Field, Namir, and Gomer. So the deck is only slightly worse. I think it's still competitive, honestly. Dragon Combo caused me to disconnect from the game. That's okay. I'm not even going to bother editing this out. I always find these to be amusing. Anyways, Dragon Combo. As I mentioned, even though Cataclysm is more expensive, you can reliably cast it on turn 5 if you Horizon on 2, because you can just on the turn before Cataclysm, like on turn 4, you can generate like the extra 2 mana that you need, and you're good, right? So yeah, it's not necessarily that different, because after you Cataclysm for the first time, you can just keep going. Although, one thing to consider, if you do that Cataclysm combo, you will not be able to Cataclysm on the following turn, because you'll have generated 2 mana. So, when you go back on the next turn, you'll have only 4 mana. So, you'll need to, when you play a shrine, you only have 5 mana. Basically, what I'm saying is you will not be able to play Cataclysm on turn 6 if you played it on 5. If my math is correct, which I think it is. So, that's a little bit of a nerf, but the deck is still the same. Chicken, yeah, losing that sucks a little bit, but you can just play other stuff. Like, Chicken was just icing on the cake, honestly. Like, oh, well, I'm already running all these broken cards. Let's just throw in Chicken, too. So, I think Dragon Combo is still solid. The main difference is, okay, I was going to touch on this. In order to do 20 damage, Dragon Combo needed to have 12 mana. They play Dragon, hit you for 5, refresh, and then they have 12 mana to do the Dragon ability 3 times for 15 more. That's 20. Now, in order to do a combo, they have to have like 10 mana or 11 mana. On 11 mana, they play Dragon, and then they hero... No, not Dragon. They hero power. They probably play Cataclysm, and then hero power to generate the 4 or 5 extra mana they need. And then the following turn, they will have a total of 16 mana, and then they can play Dragon and hit you for 15. So the difference is they'll only have 15 mana. So that's only 15 damage. I meant 15 damage, not 15 mana. It's like I'm talking too fast. So they can't do 20 damage anymore that quickly. To do 20, because the thing is, what you could do previously is you could basically have a 23 mana turn. That's why it was so insane. Because you would play Dragon ability so that you've spent 8 mana and then you generate it right back. Okay, so it was like a 20 mana turn. So with 20 mana, you can just do 20 damage with the Dragon, right? So to get to 20 mana, you'd have to start at 15 with the current Despina and then use the hero power so that you have 20 the next turn. So that is 3 turns later, and you do have to hero power the turn before. Although if you have 15 mana, yeah, you can easily Cataclysm and then use the hero power. Although that is all you can do, but that's probably all you need to do. And then you are in fact setting up the red dragon to kill your opponent. So yes, Dragon Combo got slowed down. So what this means is they'll probably rely more on other stuff like Scavengers Bidding or just heavy removal like a Helms and Karthus's. And then they might have a dragon, like, in the back, like, if the game goes too long and they need to break the stalemate. They could do that. Yeah, they'll even just stop running red altogether, and it'll just go back to the good old Wisdom Dominion control deck with Lamps again? Lamps and Scavengers Bidding. Wisdom Dominion has so many good cards that they're not gonna go down just because, like, something got weaker. Maybe you don't even play basic Despina, but I still think you do, because in a control deck, being able to generate a couple extra mana for the next turn, that's pretty good. So I imagine Dragon Combo should still be fine. A little worse, but still fine. What about aggro? So the main change, of course, is the Gladiator. Now that it's 1 health, aggro gets more easily countered. The Gladiators can get traded off a little bit better. It's gonna be a little bit worse. I wonder if they'll get scared off enough to where it isn't played as much, or maybe they'll switch over to the blue version with either Coronas or Elric, and then copy the huge Minotaurs and then play field OP. Now that Library Guards is much worse, Implant decks are not going to run Library Guards. They're going to run field OP instead to search out Overcharge, and it's essentially the same thing. And they're going to focus on Minotaur and Mutant as their turn 4 plays. Their 4-drops, because Library Guards is now a lot worse. Yeah, I think those decks will be fine. A little bit less aggressive, which is good, so you'll have a better chance to counter them. But maybe Landslide comes in and changes things, because you can bounce those 2-drops that have Overcharger on them. Or you could kill 2 Ravens with a Landslide. We'll have to see. I mean, it's hard for me to make predictions like this, because with this many card changes, a lot of testing needs to be done before we see what happens. Should be fun. Kayano loses Chicken, thank God. And the Incarnate gets a little bit worse, so it's a little bit less value. But other than that, they're still good. They lose Outbreak as well. So, but what Kayano can do is just switch over more to... Well, when I say Kayano, I mean Grand Reunion Kayano. They can just switch over to more early game with Elf Warriors and Silverfang if they can't rely on Outbreak anymore. They won't run Library Guards, certainly not. Maybe you don't even run Kayano anymore, since you can't hero power out Library Guards. But you can hero power out, like, 1-drops, like Elf Warrior or Elf Scout. I mean, okay, Elf Warrior isn't a good one. Elf Scout, you can hero power out and get a 2/2 Elf Scout. Might still be good. I don't think you'll want to run Reverence, Advanced Neva, because you already have Grand Reunion and, like, Life Force Incarnate. I don't think you need that much more card draw. Oh, maybe you do. I don't know. It'll get worse, but like all these other decks, I think it's still, like, totally playable. Maybe that was the entire intention. They didn't want to kill these decks. They just wanted to make them a little bit worse, and I think they've succeeded. And because these decks are a little bit worse, maybe other decks can come in, especially because Molten Passageway presents a lot of opportunities for some really insane decks. Good times. Shamans are mostly the same. The only difference is the hero power has a cooldown of 4. That's almost completely meaningless, because you very rarely even use the hero power. And if you did, you just used it once, and you were good. So, Shamans actually would still be good. Because they only really match up poorly with aggro, but if aggro is weaker and it gets countered more often, especially since Fire Blast is now a much better counter, maybe Shamans become a powerful deck. That could happen. And then, lastly, the Bears. Care Bears can now play with Instill Life again if they want. And the deck is really just the same. The Summoner Druid change is the only other one that hurts them. Losing Outbreak does suck, so the Care Bears basically have, like, no spells that don't suck. Like, it's hard for them to want to run Arrow Barrage. If anything, they would just have to run Landslide. But this might be a temporary situation until the buff patch comes in and makes, like, Earthquake better or something. Or, I don't know, something like that, so that they have other options. Should be fine. Hate Bear should still be fine. They still got Noxious Fumes, Flesh Sculptor, Vulture, maybe, if they need it. Infected Survivor, so not really that much worse. And the change to Life Force does not really hurt them that much. Trust me. Them getting a card back, especially because with Flesh Sculptor, you'll have a big board. The Life Force tends to be pretty big, so you'll still get a big card that draws you a card. It's going to be really good. Overall, I think the balance patch is good. It's not everything I wanted, but it's pretty pretty good. It's never everything I want. And this patch comes pretty close to hitting all the notes. All the major decks get nerfed in some way or another, except Shamans, arguably. And some preemptive nerfs, probably for the future. Also really good, with the Charged Aura to make way for some interesting energy-related cards. Yeah, I think I'm actually looking forward to trying out some new decks with stuff like Molten Passageway. But I'm sure these top decks will still be played to see just how good they are, how they match up with each other, and how they match up with the new decks that are going to come out, hopefully, that are going to be coming out to be played. I think Molten Passageway is the one that has the chance to take the world by storm, because there are some ridiculous cards you can get with it. Stuff like Bezarok and Azorius are naturally good, because Azorius already is a rage requirement, and you just toss in Corruption. You can play with Reanimate and with Bezarok. If you can Molten out a Bezarok, you can then sack him with Enoch, so you can reanimate him. It's good stuff. Yes, it's a little bit of RNG, but it's also a little bit of awesome. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think about the patch. Of course, you can post your thoughts in the forum. If you haven't already, I'm sure you have. And I'll see you guys next time. And we'll be doing a reviewing the Fuzz again on the birthday cards, on the 6 birthday cards. So not right away, because I do want to play with them a little bit more so we can actually get a better idea of where they fit, especially now with this balance patch. Like Amon's Ritual, which I originally thought was trash, might become better. Molten Passageway might turn out great. Field OP might be better now that Library Guards is gone. Entirely possible. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.